me, Marco, late 30s, working as a senior engineer at a mid-sized tech company. The kind of place that isn't a flashy startup, but pays the bills and has decent people. For years, my department was like a well-oiled machine. We had a team of about 12 people, mostly guys. Not by design, it's just who applied and had the skills. The atmosphere was professional, but relaxed. We worked hard, we delivered, and we respected each other. The boss we had before all this started was a no-nonsense guy named Frank. His entire management philosophy was, I don't care how you do it, just get it done right and on time. And we did. Productivity was always high. Morale was good. We were a team of specialists and everyone knew their role. The cornerstone of our team was Jacoby. This guy was in his late 50s, had been with the company since the dark ages. He knew every system, every client, every piece of legacy code like the back of his hand. If you were stuck on a problem, you went to Jacoby. He was the wise elder of the tribe. He wasn't officially a manager, but he was our de facto leader. Everyone looked up to him. Life was predictable, stable, and fair. Your performance was judged by the quality of your work. That's it. Then, a few months back, Frank announced his retirement. We gave him a nice send-off, wished him well, and then the speculation started about who would replace him. Most of us hoped Jacoby would finally get the official title he deserved. A couple of weeks later, corporate sent out a company-wide email introducing our new department head, Celine. The email had a picture of her, looked to be in her late 20s or early 30s. Her bio was filled with corporate buzzwords, passionate about synergy, driving disruptive change, and fostering inclusive environments. My internal alarm bells started ringing, but I told myself to give her a chance. Her first day, she called a team meeting. She walked in with a laptop covered in stickers. You know the type. She gave a little speech about her vision for the department. It was more of the same. Lots of talk about changing the culture, empowering new voices, and dismantling old structures. She kept using phrases like the default male perspective and the need to create psychological safety. The guys and I just kind of sat there, nodding politely. We're engineers, we just want to build things and solve problems. This was all just corporate fluff to us. But the fluff quickly started to become policy. The first weird thing was the meetings. Celine would ask for input on a problem. One of the guys would offer a solid technical solution. She'd listen with a blank face and say something like, "Okay, thank you for that perspective." Then, a few minutes later, one of the two women on our team would suggest something, maybe even a variation of the same idea. Celine would light up. "Yes, that's exactly the kind of forward thinking we need. Fantastic contribution." This happened over and over. After a while, most of the guys just stopped talking in meetings unless they were asked a direct question. It was pointless. Your input would either be ignored or stolen. Then came the Women of Tech weekly lunches. Celine started organizing them, inviting only the female employees in our department and a few others. The email explicitly said it was a space for women to connect and share experiences without the presence of men. Nobody really complained out loud, but it felt off. It was state-sanctioned exclusion, right there in our work calendar. Imagine if Jacoby had tried to host a men's engineering lunch. HR would have had a meltdown. Project assignments started getting weird. The most challenging career-building projects were suddenly all being assigned to the junior female employees. The rest of us, the senior guys who had been handling these kinds of tasks for years, were put on maintenance duty. We were basically told to keep the old systems running, while the real innovation happened elsewhere. Our jobs became incredibly boring. We went from architects to janitors. I tried to talk to one of the women about it, a younger girl who was actually pretty smart. I asked her if she felt overwhelmed since she was given a massive project that would normally go to a senior like me or Jacoby. She told me Celine was mentoring her personally and that it was a huge opportunity. She said Celine believed the company had been holding women back for too long. And this was just correcting a historical imbalance. It was clear she was completely sold on the ideology. The atmosphere in the office changed. The easy camaraderie we used to have was gone. Now there was a weird tension. It felt like we were walking on eggshells. Celine would make little comments in passing. If a few of us were talking by the coffee machine, she'd walk by and say, "Hope you're not having too much of a boys' club meeting." She never said it like a joke. it was always with this little smug smile. One time, Jacoby was explaining a complex server issue to me. Celine overheard him and interrupted, saying, "Jacoby, try to explain it in a more inclusive way so everyone can understand, not just the tech guys." Jacoby just stared at her. We were the tech guys. That was the whole point. He just nodded slowly and walked away. I could see the frustration building in him and in all of us. We were being treated like relics, like the problem that needed to be managed. The real breaking point, for me at least, happened with a big client project. It was a complete mess. The system was failing, the client was furious, and we were about to lose a major contract. Celine assigned the task of fixing it to one of her preferred employees, the woman who had gotten the project she wasn't qualified for. Unsurprisingly, she couldn't handle it. The problem got worse. Finally, with the deadline looming, Celine came to me, Jacobe, and two other senior guys. She told us we needed to be team players and step in to support our colleague. We basically had to clean up a monumental disaster with almost no time left. We pulled it off. We worked through 2 nights, fueled by stale coffee and sheer willpower. We found the root cause, rewrote a huge chunk of code, and stabilized the system hours before the final deadline. The client was happy. The company didn't lose the contract. We felt like we had saved the day. A week later, there was a department-wide meeting to discuss the project. We all expected to get some credit, at least a simple thank you. Celine stood up at the front of the room and started talking about what a success the project was. Then she said, "I especially want to give a shout out to our project lead. She showed incredible leadership by delegating tasks and leveraging the full resources of her team under pressure. It's a great example of modern collaborative management. She gave all the credit to the person who caused the disaster in the first place. Me, Jacoby, and the other 2 guys weren't even mentioned by name. We were the full resources of her team." I just sat there in my chair, looking at the table. I felt this cold rage building inside me. It was such a blatant, shameless lie. After that meeting, I decided I had to say something. I wasn't going to be aggressive. I was just going to have an honest conversation with her, manager to employee. I scheduled a one-on-one meeting in her office. I came in prepared. I had a list of specific examples, the project assignments, the biased praise, the exclusive meetings. I started by saying I wanted to talk about team morale. I told her that many of the senior team members felt their contributions were being undervalued. I explained that we felt a divide was being created in the team, and that it was impacting our motivation. I tried my best to keep it professional and focused on team dynamics, not on her personally. She listened to the whole thing without saying a word, just staring at me with a perfectly neutral expression. When I finished, she was quiet for a few seconds. Then she said, "Marco, I appreciate you bringing your feelings to me. It takes courage to speak up." I felt a moment of relief. Maybe she was actually listening. I was wrong. She then leaned forward and her whole demeanor changed. She started explaining that what I was experiencing wasn't a real problem. It was my own discomfort with a shifting power dynamic. She told me that for decades, men had benefited from a system that prioritized them by default. What I perceived as fairness was actually just the continuation of that privilege. She said my feelings of being undervalued were actually just the experience of losing that unearned advantage. It was like talking to a brick wall. I tried to bring it back to the specific examples, like the client project. I asked her how it was fair that the people who did all the work were ignored, while the person who failed got all the credit. She had an answer for that too. She said that by giving the praise to a woman, she was disrupting the narrative that only men can be technical heroes. She told me that celebrating female leadership, even if their contribution was more managerial, was a crucial step in building an equitable workplace. She was basically admitting it was all for show. It was ideological theater. The final blow was when she looked at me and said, with a tone of clinical diagnosis, "You need to understand, your reaction is a classic symptom of male fragility. You feel threatened by a strong female leader, and you're interpreting her efforts to create equity as a personal attack." She recommended I take some of the company's online courses on unconscious bias. I just stood up. There was nothing left to say. I said, "Okay, I understand," and walked out of her office. I wasn't even angry anymore. I just felt this profound sense of hopelessness. You can't reason with someone who has an answer for everything, who can twist any fact to fit their worldview. Logic doesn't work, facts don't work. Any disagreement is just proof that you're the problem. I went back to my desk and told the other guys what happened. Nobody was surprised. They had all seen it coming. The morale in the department, which was already low, completely cratered. The guys adopted a new strategy: quiet quitting. We did exactly what was asked of us, and not one thing more. We clocked in at 9, we clocked out at 5. No more late nights, no more going the extra mile. Why bother? Your effort wouldn't be recognized anyway. It might even be used to prop someone else up. The department's productivity started to dip. Not enough to cause a major crisis, but enough to be noticeable. Deadlines started getting missed by a day or two. The quality of work was still fine, but the spark was gone. Celine didn't seem to notice, or if she did, she didn't care. She was too busy writing long emails about diversity initiatives and planning her next empowerment workshop. We were all just biding our time, updating our resumes, and looking for other jobs. We thought that was the only way out. Then came the final, unforgivable act, the move that pushed us from passive despair to active resistance. The position of lead engineer opened up. It was a senior management track role, the official second in command for the whole department. In any sane world, there was only one candidate: Jacoby. The man had dedicated his entire adult life to this company. He had more experience than anyone else, including Celine. He was universally respected by everyone, even the women Celine had been promoting. For him, this was supposed to be the capstone of his career, a recognition of his decades of loyalty and expertise. It was a formality, a slam dunk. Celine had to go through the motions, of course. She posted the job opening. Jacoby formally applied. A few other people from other departments applied too. Celine conducted interviews. She interviewed Jacoby for about 15 minutes. He later told us it was the strangest interview of his life. She didn't ask him any technical questions. She didn't ask about his experience managing projects. She asked him things like, how would you handle a situation where a male employee makes a female employee feel uncomfortable? And what are your thoughts on the gender gap in the tech industry? It was an ideology test, not a job interview. A week later, Celine called a big team meeting, the announcement. We were all expecting to applaud for Jacoby. Celine stood at the front of the room with a huge smile on her face. She said she had some incredibly exciting news to share. She talked about how committed the company was to promoting from within and to breaking down old barriers. Then she announced the new lead engineer. It was a woman from the marketing department. I'm not kidding. Marketing. She had zero engineering experience. Her degree was in communications. The entire room was silent. You could have heard a pin drop. We were all looking at Jacoby. His face was like stone. He didn't react. He just stared straight ahead. Celine went on and on about how this was a bold, cross-functional hiring choice, and how the new lead would bring a fresh customer-focused perspective to our technical team. It was the most insulting, ridiculous thing I had ever heard in my professional life. She had passed over the most qualified man in the entire building for a completely unqualified woman, purely for ideological reasons. It was a slap in the face not just to Jacoby, but to all of us. It was a clear message. Your skills mean nothing. Your experience means nothing. Your loyalty means nothing. The only thing that matters is which boxes you check. The meeting ended. Nobody clapped. People just quietly got up and shuffled back to their desks. That afternoon, I saw Jacoby packing his things. He was cleaning out his desk, putting personal items into a small cardboard box. I thought he was quitting. I wouldn't have blamed him. My heart just sank. If Jacoby left, the department was truly finished. That evening after work, a few of us met up at a bar. The mood was like a funeral. Everyone was talking about leaving. The consensus was that the department was a lost cause. We were about an hour into it when Jacoby walked in. We were all surprised to see him. He sat down, ordered a drink, and was quiet for a bit, listening to everyone vent. Finally, when there was a lull in the conversation, he spoke. He told us he wasn't quitting. We were all confused. He said that watching everyone talk about running away was disappointing. He said, if you run, she wins. She gets exactly what she wants, a department full of compliant juniors who will never question her. Someone asked what else we could do. We'd tried talking to her. We had no power. And that's when Jacoby laid it all out. He started by saying that fighting her on the level of ideas was impossible. He told us you can't win a debate with a zealot. Their belief system is a fortress. He said that HR wouldn't help us because Celine was implementing exactly the kind of progressive policies that corporate HR loves to brag about. To them, Celine was a star. We were just the dinosaurs resisting change. So, he said, we stop fighting her on her terms. We fight her on the company's terms. What does the company care about more than anything? More than diversity, more than equity, more than all the buzzwords, money, and avoiding lawsuits? He looked around the table. We can't complain as individuals, he said. As individuals, we are disposable. Our complaints are just our fragile male egos. But as a group, he continued, as a collective bargaining unit, we have power. We were all just staring at him, not quite getting it. And then he said the word. We form a union. The word just hung there in the air. A union. It sounded like something out of a history book, something coal miners or factory workers did 100 years ago. We were tech guys. We wrote code and managed servers. We didn't form unions. One of the guys, a younger network admin, was the first to speak. He said that was crazy, that the company would fire us all on the spot. But Jacoby was ready for that. He calmly explained that it's a common misconception. He'd spent the last few days doing a lot of reading on labor laws. He told us that federal law gives employees the right to organize. He said that it's illegal for a company to fire, demote, or retaliate against employees for trying to form a union. That's the whole point. It's protected activity. He explained the process. We needed to get a certain percentage of our department to sign authorization cards. Then we file a petition with the National Labor Relations Board. The company would be officially notified, and then there'd be an election. If we won the vote, the company would be legally required to recognize us as a union and bargain with us in good faith. Suddenly, it didn't sound so crazy. It sounded like a plan. It sounded like using a bigger, more powerful system to fight Celine's broken system. Jacoby emphasized the most important part. He said that Celine was arrogant. She was so convinced of her own ideological righteousness that she probably didn't even know these laws existed. He predicted that her first instinct, upon finding out, would be to do something emotional, something stupid, something illegal, and that would be the trap. We talked for hours that night. The mood shifted from despair to a kind of nervous, cautious excitement. For the first time in months, it felt like we had a path. We weren't just victims anymore. We agreed to move forward. Jacoby would be our leader. The next phase of our lives felt like something out of a spy movie. We communicated through an encrypted messaging app on a private group we called the Maintenance Crew. We never, ever talked about it at work. Not a word. Not a knowing glance. In the office, we were the perfect docile employees, quiet, compliant, doing our jobs with bland professionalism. We held secret meetings on weekends, in the back room of a public library or at a park. Jacoby had us doing homework. Our first task was to build a case. We needed to document everything, every instance of bias, every unfair decision, every passive-aggressive comment. We created a shared, encrypted document. We went back through months of emails. We documented the project assignments, showing how all the high-profile work was diverted from experienced men to inexperienced women. We documented the public praise, contrasting the glowing reviews for Celine's favorites with the complete silence about our own contributions. We even logged the Women of Tech lunches, noting the dates and the fact that they were company-sponsored events that explicitly excluded male employees. The story the data told was damning. It wasn't just a feeling of unfairness. It was a clear, provable pattern of discrimination. This document, Jacoby said, was our insurance policy. While we were doing this, Jacoby was in contact with a professional union organizer he'd found online. The organizer gave us advice, sent us the official authorization cards, and helped us understand the legal steps. He told us we had a very strong case. The day we signed the cards was a major milestone. We met at Jacoby's house. He had them all laid out on his dining room table. Signing that card was a strange feeling. It was a real physical act of defiance. It was a commitment. There was no going back. Every single man in the department signed one. Even the two younger guys who were initially scared. The injustice had touched everyone. We had well over the percentage we needed. The following Monday, Jacoby and the union organizer filed our petition with the NLRB. A clock started ticking. According to the law, the company would be served with a formal notice within a day or two. Those next couple of days at the office were the most surreal of my life. We'd all go about our work, debugging code, running diagnostics, acting like nothing was happening. But under the surface, the air was electric with anticipation. It was a shared secret that bound us all together like nothing before. We were just waiting for the explosion. It happened on a Wednesday afternoon. I was at my desk when I saw Celine walking quickly back from the executive wing. Her face was pale and her hands were shaking. She walked into her glass-walled office and slammed the door shut. A few minutes later, an email went out to the entire department. Subject: Mandatory Emergency Meeting. Conference Room B. Now. This was it. We all filed into the conference room. Nobody was talking. We took our seats around the big table. Celine was already there, standing at the head of the table. She looked like she was barely holding herself together. Her eyes were scanning our faces, one by one, looking for a flicker of guilt or fear. She found none. We all looked back at her with neutral expressions. She was holding a piece of paper in her hand. The official notice. She started talking. Her voice was strained, high-pitched. She said she had been informed of a deeply disturbing development. She said that a small, misguided group had taken steps to undermine the department's mission. She talked about how hard she had worked to build a culture of trust and inclusivity. Then, her composure finally broke. Her voice started rising. She accused us of being unable to handle a woman in a position of power. She said this was a coordinated, misogynistic attack. That we were trying to preserve our privilege and create a hostile work environment for women. It was a masterclass in projection, accusing us of everything she herself had done. She was pacing back and forth now. "This department is a team," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "And on my team, we do not tolerate sabotage. We do not tolerate this kind of toxic behavior." We just sat there, saying nothing, letting her dig her own grave, just like Jacoby predicted. She stopped pacing and slammed her hand on the table. The sound echoed in the silent room. "So, here's what's going to happen," she spat. "Anyone who signed this betrayal, can stand up, collect their things, and leave." She looked around the room, expecting, I think, for one or two guys to crack under the pressure. Nobody moved. Her face turned a shade of red I'd never seen before. This was not going according to her script. "You don't get it, do you?" she yelled. "This isn't a negotiation. This is an act of insubordination. You are actively working against this company's interests." She took a deep breath, trying to regain control, and then she said the magic words, the words we had been waiting for. "As of this moment, every single person who was a party to this disgusting plot is terminated. You're fired, all of you." She actually said it. Jacoby, who had been sitting perfectly still this whole time, just gave the slightest, almost imperceptible nod. The trap had been sprung. Right at that moment, as if on cue, the conference room door opened. Two figures walked in. It was the site director, Celine's boss's boss, and the head of human resources for the entire company. They were not smiling. Their faces were grim, professional, and radiating a level of corporate seriousness that I had never seen before. Celine's jaw dropped. She was not expecting them. "What's going on?" she stammered. "I'm handling a serious disciplinary issue." The director ignored her. He looked around the room at all of us. Then he looked back at Celine, his eyes like ice. "Celine," he said, his voice quiet but carrying immense authority. "What exactly did you just say to these employees?" She puffed out her chest, trying to reassert her dominance. "I fired them," she said defiantly, "for gross insubordination and attempting to create a toxic, unionized environment." The head of HR, a woman in her 50s who looked like she'd seen everything, physically winced. The director didn't even blink. "You did what?" he asked again, slowly, as if talking to a child. "I terminated their employment," Celine insisted. "They were actively sabotaging my diversity and equity initiatives." The director took a step closer to her. "Celine, what you have just done, in front of multiple witnesses, is called union busting. It is a direct and serious violation of the National Labor Relations Act." He let that sink in. By firing employees for engaging in legally protected organizing activities, you have just exposed this company to a massive, and I mean massive, federal lawsuit. Celine's face went from red to white. She started to backpedal. No, you don't understand. This wasn't about the union. It was about their attitude, their toxicity. The HR head finally spoke. Did you, or did you not, just state that you were firing them for signing the petition? She asked, her voice like a prosecutor's. Celine was speechless. She had been caught, red-handed, in a room full of witnesses. The director looked at us. To be clear, he said to the whole room, nobody is fired. That was a mistake, a serious mistake. All of you, please return to your desks. We will handle this. Then he turned back to Celine. You, my office, now. We all stood up and filed out of the room. As I walked past the table, I made eye contact with Jacoby. He had the calmest, most satisfied look on his face. The next 24 hours were a blur of corporate damage control. An army of HR people descended on our department. They interviewed each of us, one by one. But this time, it was different. We weren't the accused. We were the victims. We had our document ready. We gave them a copy. The one with all the dates, the emails, the proof. They weren't asking us questions to see if we were telling the truth. They were asking us questions to build their legal case against Celine. They needed to prove that she was a rogue manager who acted against company policy in order to limit the company's own liability. We never saw Celine again. An email went out the next day saying she was on an indefinite leave of absence. A week after that, another wave of official announcements. The first one announced that an internal review had found irregularities in recent promotions. The promotion of the woman from marketing to lead engineer was officially rescinded. She was quietly moved back to her old job. Other project assignments were also reversed. The second announcement came an hour later. It stated that, after a thorough review of qualified candidates, the position of lead engineer was being awarded to Jacoby. That's when we knew we had won. Not just won the battle, but the war. Merit had been restored. Sanity had been restored. The union election happened a few weeks later. It was just a formality at that point. We voted unanimously in favor. Corporate didn't fight it. Their lawyers probably told them to just give us whatever we wanted to avoid the lawsuit. We didn't ask for much. Our contract mostly just formalized what we always thought we had. Promotions based on seniority and merit, clear and unbiased procedures for project assignments, and a grievance process that didn't involve being called fragile. Life in the department went back to normal. Well, a new normal. They brought in a temporary manager, a boring middle-aged guy from accounting who cared about nothing except spreadsheets and deadlines. It was wonderful. The tension was gone. The politics were gone. We could just come to work and work. The team became closer than ever before. We'd been through a war together. We'd trusted each other, and we'd won. Sometimes I think about Celine. I don't think she was evil. I think she genuinely believed she was a hero. She was so trapped in her own ideology that she couldn't see the reality in front of her. She thought she was fighting the patriarchy. But in the end, she wasn't defeated by male toxicity or some grand conspiracy. She was defeated by a few paragraphs in the National Labor Relations Act and a corporation's fear of litigation. She tried to play a game of culture war, but we responded by playing the game of corporate law. We just played it better. We never wanted to fight. We just wanted to be treated fairly, to be judged on the quality of our work. It took a long, stressful journey, but we got it back. And it all started because one old, wise engineer knew that you don't argue with fanatics. You just use the rules of the system they don't understand. V.